My name is Rhoma Spencer, and I noticed everybody are all doing a written tribute to my boy Sprangalang, and I have so much that I could say that I choose to do mine as a video. Yeah, so here we go. Now, the news of Sprangalang's death didn't come as a surprise to me because deep down in my heart, I knew that after his brother died at the end of May, I felt like it was inevitable that Sprang could kick the bucket soon after, so that because he was already ailing, and he fight. Oh my God, that boy, he did put up a good fight, but I felt that when he went into hospital last week, he gave up. But I digress. My memory of Sprangalang is so much. Sprangalang is the reason why I'm in comedy today. Yeah, and I am inspired by him. Sprangalang was the person who, in 1991, met me outside Mascamp Pub. Myself, Michael Manswell, and a couple others. I can't remember who else, but I always remember myself and my Michael Manswell because we were talking enough shit. And I remember Sprangalang I don't know if he was coming into the pub or he was leaving, but all of a sudden, Sprang gets in the middle of our conversation and says to me, hey, Paul Keynes looking for a woman to be in the tent, girl. Go up and audition, call him. I think he gave me the number and everything. And by the next day, I called to pick Paul Keynes Douglas, organize a time to meet him at Queen's Hall, and I left my job. Those days I worked at VAT office on St. Vincent Street during my lunch hour, and I went up to Queen's Hall to audition for Paul Keynes Douglas. The piece that I auditioned was a poem called What You Want to Say, Pan Man. Is it? No. Colonial Bacchanal Jamet, Colonial Jamet, yes. That was the piece I auditioned with, and Paul Keynes said, all right, I want you to perform, you'll just perform this weekend, and I was to perform just for one weekend. And I remained in the talk tent for the next 8 years, from 1991 to 1999. I was one of the only two women in the talk tent at that time, myself and Deborah Jean-Baptiste. Eventually, Sprangalang left the talk tent and left me there. Eventually, Deborah Jean-Baptiste left and left me there. So I was at the talk tent until I migrated to Canada to do postgraduate studies in theater in 1999. My style of comedy, the way in which I put across what I do on stage, is inspired by Sprang. I often tell people that I'm not a stand-up comic because I don't stand up and give jokes after jokes. I don't give jokes. I talk about scenarios and situations. Always come from myself. I start with poking fun at me first, yeah? And it is these situations and scenarios, whether is it local or international scandals and issues, that I take and I turn it on its head. And when I present it in my particular style, it makes you laugh. So that is how it becomes comedy, and that to me is straight out of Sprangalang's book. I was really inspired by the way in which he presented comedy, presented a story. I took inspiration from that to be the style in which I would also present my form of comedy. Yeah. So when Tony, his brother, who is also my mentor, says to me that it amazes him to look at me because Sprangalang's sense of humor is his dad. He has seen his dad in Sprangalang and the way in which he put across and say things. It's really his father. And then to see me singing and looking like Sprang in the way in which I put across what I have to say on stage, he said it just used to blow his mind, you know. So I took that as a serious compliment because I look up to Sprang a whole lot. I often say that he is the reason for why I do what I do. And so, of course, his passing, you know, it really put a toll on me because it means that I've lost my two mentors in this year, 5 months apart. Tony Hall, Dennis Sprangalang Hall, my hallowed halls of excellence. I have lost them in a matter of 5 months apart. And it is very, very sad. Besides the comedy, which of course Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and by extension the world knows Sprangalang, I also know him, remember, as a kid, as a teenager, looking at him on television in on Gael every week in cultural Sprangalang, coming out of a closet, dusting himself off, dust coming out of his clothing as he gives you some trivia on our cultural heritage. I learned so much from those trivias. Some I knew, some I half of the time, excuse me, half of the time I don't even know some of the answers, you know. I depended on the answers being told by the audience the next week when they send in their answers. And his favorite line, you may not win a jersey, but at least but you learn something. Yeah. So every week I tuned into Gael to taking Sprangalang and those trivias. So that's how I knew him. So I cannot safely tell you when was the first time I met Sprangalang personally. I really can't remember. But what I do remember, and I always cherish, as a theatre practitioner, back in those days, Sprangalang used to have a business running lighting. He and Oliver Williams from San Fernando, Naparima Bowl, they both had a little business running whereby if you have a show and the space don't have lighting, they will provide the lights for you. And it will be Sprangalang will come in his van, he will put up the lights for you, put on the board. In those days, he will stay and operate the board. But as time went on, he started to get very busy and he didn't really have time. He didn't have the time to now sit in your show to run the lights, far less even put it up. So Sprangalang taught me how to put up the lights and run the board. In those days, we had a theatre company in Santa Rosa Heights in Rhoma, the Santa Rosa Heights Arts Center. And Gemma Along Redmond was the artistic director. And when I joined the Arts Center at the time, they were doing a play by Errol John called Irene's Song. And I was the stage manager. And we did the show at the Arima Town Hall. That show starred Valerie Laura Stevens and Gillian Moore. Those were the first time I met these two individuals. They lived in just over, two main roads down from Santa Rosa Heights. They were on O'Meara roadside. I was near Tumpuna roadside. And we did Irene's Song in a Rhoma Town Hall. A Rhoma Town Hall is just that, it's a town hall. It had a stage, but no lighting. And Sprangalang bringing in the lights and show me what to do, blah, 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 how to hook it up, how to program, so-called program the board, where, you know, the board consisted of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And those numbers represented the different areas of the stage. So 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe the upstage lights, 5, 6, 7, 8, this more the center stage rig, and 9, 10, 11, 12 or what have you will be downstage. So I know on my board when I push up 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, is to isolate the upstage area and so on. So I cherish the moment that I had the ability to know what it is to put up lighting for a stage and operate a lighting board through Sprangalang. Yeah. But more than that, we've toured performing at the Caribbean Comedy Festival in Washington, D.C. Those were, you know, once I started to live here in Canada, that's how we would meet up at a festival out in Washington, D.C., or another Caribbean comedy festival out in Boston. We met on the Caribbean comedy circuit. And whenever I return home, of course, I will always look him up. In those days, the best place to find him really was in Mass Camp Pub. He's either he emceeing a show, or he just lying in there chatting, talking with Mr. Ward, the late Mr. Ward, and those guys, and Stalin. Stalin was also a regular. And then, of course, by the time in the last year, he had gotten ill, and boy, the stories that that I heard, you know, both from him and Susie and Tony, you know, how he came back, he just bounced back from death's door. You know, he fight a good fight. And I was so proud of him, you know. And of course, these things comes, you know, that survival strategy and all that it took, and the time he spent in the hospital, all of that was you know, a comedy, you know, in the way in which he will tell me the time he spent there and all that he went through. But more than that, by the time he went back in the hospital last week, the news just wasn't coming good. It was not, and I felt like he himself gave up. You know, Sprangalang, he didn't want to fight anymore. He just didn't. You know, so his death was not. It was no surprise to me, because I knew the moment Tony died that it was inevitable that he would also pass on not too long after. So his death, you know, it's no shocker to me. But I cherish the memories that we had. I last visited with Sprang in October. In September, I did a show at a place called Drinks Bar with Lisa Allen Agostini and Loris Leasing, Femcom. And at that show, I walked on stage with my handbag, and I told the audience they will know why I have that handbag later on. And after the show, after my set, I said to the audience again the story of how I came to be in this field, you know, and that he is my muse, he's my mentor, and he's no longer working, and I want them to help me to raise some needed funds for him that night. That whatever I am working for this night, every cent was going to him, and I want them to match it. And match it they did. And I left the show and went straight to Sprang's home in Curep and deposited that money, which was $2,000 and change, to Susie. And so I saw him in September, and then when I went September and October, because I was in Trinidad on 2 occasions within like a 2-month span. And my, oh my, the piece of old talk that we had outside his home against a wall, I will always cherish. I will always cherish. And the last one that I remember, which she told me, again, it's just in conversation, and it's not like he set out to tell me any joke. No, it's just conversation. And one that stuck out for me the most is that he told me this when his brother died, something around his father, that his father, he was tying out some goats. Yeah. The neighbor asked the father to tie out the goats out, or to bring the goats back in the evening, because the neighbor would not have been around, and he asked Dennis and Tony's father to please untie the goats for him and bring it in. And Sprang said his mother was, very stoush and very disturbed. Why are you doing that? Why, questioning the husband, Mr. Hall? How disgraceful it is. You're a big teacher. Tying and untying goats. How that will look in the face of the neighbors and the people. And he said his father said, but wait, it's not like I'm teaching the goats. It's just I'm tired tying the goats. I ain't teaching the goats. So I always remember that. And so many things that he shared with me, both he and Tony. I will always remember and cherish these memories. And I want to say, man is only by birth a pilgrim on earth, and Sprang's pilgrim is over. It's done, and he has moved on. And I want to say to his wife, Susie, that it is well, Susie. Eternal rest is now granted unto him, and he is in peace and at a better place now. No more pain, no more sorrow. So my condolences and my sympathies to Susie, his daughter, whose name I can't recall, she lives in New York, to his sister-in-law, Mary Hall, his niece and nephew, Lindsay Hall, Maury Hall, and his grandnieces, Maya, and again, I can't recall the Canadian one name, but there is a sower in the skies who sows the seeds of stars. That sower's name is death, my love, who sows that we must die. And if I die before you, love, the harvest that I reap will be the memory of our love through everlasting sleep. Through everlasting sleep, my love. Through everlasting sleep. Curtain call. Dennis Sprangalang Hall.